Hey everybody, welcome to day 25 of the 60-day novel writing challenge, where we are going to be talking about how to begin our stories. If you haven't hit that subscribe button below, go ahead and click it now. And then whatever it is you're drinking today, grab a cup, cozy up, and let's get to writing. I want you guys to know is as you start looking at what your very opening is going to be, your first chapter, how you're going to hook your reader, is that you will probably rewrite this later. I think every single book that I have written, yep, I'm gonna say every single one, I wrote the beginning and then I rewrote it. And with some of them, I probably rewrote it 10 to 20 times. With book 4, I think I maybe only rewrote it once because I planned really well with book 4. But just know that you don't want to spend weeks laboring over your first chapter. All right, just write it, get it out, and then come back to it later after the story is written, after you have all of the experience of what your characters are going to go through and what kind of style you're going to use by the end of the book. That is when you're going to go back and you're going to end up rewriting that first chapter anyway. So don't beat yourself up trying to get this perfect. But with that being said, we definitely want to give it the best go that we can on our first time through, so that when we come back to rewrite it, we'll have something really awesome to start with, and then we can make it even better. Now, there are a lot of opinions out in the world about how to start a book. You know, there's kind of a formula that a lot of people follow, which is starting with kind of the daily average life of your characters, and then an inciting incident comes along, which then sparks the action and sparks the adventure. And that is perfectly fine. But I'm not here to teach you guys a formula or tell you how to do it. I'm here to give you the elements of what make them successful, to tell you what it is readers love and what they're craving, so that if you put that into your first chapter, into your opening, they'll want to keep reading. Because the whole goal of the opening is to hook your reader. The goal is if they're in the store and they pick up the book and they read 2 pages, they say, I have to buy this. This looks good. And how do we do that? I've got 3 do's and 2 don'ts to give you to help you make this opening as strong as you can. And the first one is just to make your reader care, to connect them to the main character, either through something they can relate to that character with, like that character is going through a really tough struggle that makes your reader really feel like they're in their shoes, or they're having a great time and the reader feels like they're in their shoes. It has to be something connective. So the second thing, and this is probably going to sound a little bit familiar if you've been watching all these videos, is to create anticipation and tension. So come up with something in that opening that is going to hook your reader in because something is wrong and they need to see it resolved, or there's something that needs to be overcome. And so they're immediately strapped into that roller coaster, wanting to see how it is that your character is going to resolve whatever tension has already come up. That suspense and that anticipation has to happen somewhere in your first chapter to hook your reader and keep them reading. And the third is also something familiar. Make your reader feel something. So whatever it is, if it's a strong sense of anger, of outrage, of happiness, of whatever you want to come up with. I know that for my book, I think my main thing is just going to be like a sense of joy, a sense of like fun and belonging. I want to start that opening chapter strong so that the reader feels like they're a part of this world and they're having a great time in it and they're actually laughing at the jokes that I'm making. And then when something goes wrong, then there's really some tension because they were actually actively enjoying what I had written already. And then the tension is going to be even more impactful. So try to focus on giving your reader a really strong feeling or a really strong emotion, because they're going to know right off the bat, if you're able to do that in the first chapter, that you're going to be able to do it throughout the rest of the book. And I have 2 don'ts, 2 things that you do not want to include in your first chapter or in the opening of your story. And the first one is to not get bogged down in the backstory. I know chronologically, we would want to introduce the backstory first because it happened before where we're starting, but in a storytelling sense, that is not the way you want to do it. You don't want to start with what happened first, because remember, we talked about this before. You want to sprinkle that in. That is world building, and you can't just bombard your reader with an info dump like that, especially in the first chapter, because if that's what they're starting with, they're not going to make it to chapter 2. So remember, those details need to be sprinkled in throughout the story. Don't start with the backstory and the world building. And the second thing is to make sure you're actually starting with the story story itself. So remember, we wrote our blurbs. We know what our main conflict is. That is your story. So don't start this book 50 years in the past And don't start it with a side character who witnesses something that's going to turn into the main story later. Start with the story itself, even if that looks like starting with a normal day in the life of the character and then there's an inciting incident. That is okay because it's all still part of the story. Having that normal day-to-day life interrupted is the story, but don't start somewhere else or with somebody else or in a different time. Remember, the goal of the first chapter is to hook your reader and make them want to keep reading. And the best way to do that is to introduce your main character and make sure your reader really feels a connection with them. Put real feels into that scene and put a sense of anticipation in there so they are eager to keep moving forward. So today's homework is not to write the first scene, but to come up with where you want the story to begin, where it's going to take place, and how you are going to hook your reader. Really just write out, like almost like in a letter to yourself, this is how I'm going to hook my reader. This is what is going to keep them from putting my book down after 2 pages in. And then we'll do the actual writing of that scene starting on day 31 as we get to the second half of the 60-day novel writing challenge. Right now, we're still in our planning phase. We're getting ourselves psyched up so that we're ready to hit the ground running on day 1 and write the whole book in 30 days. So I'm gonna jump off and do this too. And I'll tell you right now, the ways that I'm going to make this work, I'm gonna make people care about my reader by making that opening just really fun and enjoyable to read. It's gonna be like such a good time, and she's got this awesome sibling rivalry going on. And so when her sister is murdered at the end of the chapter, it's gonna leave this sense of intrigue and this sense of something being taken away, because this girl who started out the first chapter being so carefree and being so fun to read about is now very clearly gonna change drastically. And any reader who gets to the end of that chapter is gonna be naturally curious about how this is gonna change the main character's life and what the next steps are for her and how she's gonna figure out who killed her sister. So try to fit all of those elements into your story while taking it really easy on the world building and on the backstory. If you haven't hit that subscribe button below, go ahead and click it now, and then I will see you guys tomorrow for day 26 of the 60-day novel writing challenge.